welcome to a new video, and I want to cover today the graphical user interface. I may break this down to multiple videos. I will try to stop at the 15th minute, and then I believe I will not be done by then, so I will have another video for that particular chapter and maybe one more. So, graphical user interface, this is a fun chapter. I think you're all going to enjoy it. It builds on everything you learned so far, but bring you to building something like the ones you actually use. All the programs that we wrote today is probably, you haven't really dealt with a software that acts like the ones you created. Here from this chapter, you can really create some cool stuff, things that you would enjoy, and I hope you will really have fun in this chapter. So graphical user interface, it's all about graphics, all about building a user interface to your application and making that user interface event driven. In the video about from chapter 9 events, I talked about what's event driven programming, where you build your software where it is in listening mode and it acts only when the user fires an event or initiates an event. So the purpose of this chapter is to introduce several components, common user interface components, to understand how to lay those components out in a user interface in a container, and how do you register events and make them work together and make those three pieces together. So any graphical user interface has then three major parts. The first part is you deciding which components from the library, and there are external libraries of components. The Java library is basic components in it. There are basic components in it. There are vendors that can build more sophisticated and complex components. When you feel very comfortable, you can start building your own components and give them the look and feel and behavior that you want. So first thing is to decide what components you want to use in your program. The second is how are you going to lay out your components, or in other words, what would the program or software or the frame look like, where everything will be. That's called layout. And then finally, what events your program will respond to. There are an array of events on each component. Some component can fire several types of events, so you need to make a decision which event you're going to respond to in your program, and putting all of those pieces together. So the way this chapter is working is it takes them each component separately, introduce to you what this component is about by providing a list of properties that you can use to customize the component, and also provide you with the list of events that the component supports and give you example. As we mentioned back in chapter 9, once you know the event that the component supports, there is an interface in the library that corresponds to that event, and you would create a class, a listener class, that implements that interface and register that listener class with the component. So let's first start with text input. How do you read or get input from the user on a component in the graphical user interface? So you use JTextField. The JTextField provides space for user input, and you define the JTextField through a constructor. There are multiple constructors for JTextField, and one of them receives the width, so how wide you want your text field to be. Usually it is common to provide a label next to the text field. The difference between the label and the text field is that the label displays text, the text field can actually collect text, or the in a graphical user interface example, the label is just for display purposes, and the text field is for the user to click and start typing data in it. So here we have one label, we have one text field, we have one button, and then we have another label. To process the text input, you can, the easiest way is the button. So you come and say, well, the user, after they enter the text they want, they click on the button, and in this case you use the action event on the button and you listen to it by implementing an action listener. So here we're creating a class add interest listener that implement action listener, which provides one method called action performed, where you put the information you want. Here it calculates the rate by using the getText method on the text field. So the text field has a method called the getText to retrieve the text, and the label has a method setText to set the text to a certain value. So text, in other words, is a property of the label, and it has a set and get method to allow you to access that property. Here is the example. One of the things that was mentioned in chapter 10, I believe, is that with the inheritance is the extension of the JFrame class. We used to extend the J component, which makes our class a component, and then we go to the main method and add that component. Here there is another approach. Instead of creating a frame and then create your own component and add it to the frame, you can make your class a frame by itself. So the purpose of the main method then is to create an object of your frame, set the close operation, make it visible, and that's it. You will then create your own frame. If you need to create your own component, you create your own components, and in that frame you use the constructor, the default constructor, which the main method will call in order to initialize the different components by creating the label objects, by creating the text fields and the buttons and the panels and so on. In this case, since there is so much to be done, instead of writing all of it inside the constructor, this example defines a method, a helper method called create text fields, create button, create panel, and set size in order to create button, panel, and text field in order to group together the steps needed to create each one of them. So in creating the text field, you need to create a label, to create a text field and set the text to it. If you want to create a button, you'll need to create the button. Then you use an inner class in order to define what the button will do. Then in creating a panel, so a panel is an invisible component. It's like a frame, but it doesn't show. And you use it if you want to group together multiple components and have them. It's like group if you use the PowerPoint and Word, and you can click on multiple components and then group them together. So that's what the panel allow you to do. A text, so that's the first component, the text field. Now, when you study that stuff, when you come to the example of the text field, I strongly advise you that you then switch to NetBeans, spend time typing the code for the example of the text field, and get to know how that code actually works. You may also go to the API documentation, and you can follow the link from Blackboard and go to the class JTextField or JTextArea and look at the properties and the methods that this class has. JTextArea is very similar to JTextField. The difference is that a text area represents a larger area, text field represents only one line. So in the text area, you provide the number of rows and the number of columns to specify how big or small you want the text area to be. You can add text to the text area by calling the set text. You can also call append. So if the user is typing in the text area, or if you want to get output and append it to the existing text, you can use append. You can use the new line characters in order to separate lines in the text area. You can use the set editable method in order to make the text area editable, meaning the user can click and start typing, or you can make it not editable, where the user cannot type and it's only used for display purposes. The text area and the text field, they are both subclasses of the JText component. So everything that the JText component has, methods and properties, both of them has it as well. Method append is declared only in the JText area because it makes no sense to have it in the JText field. You can add scroll bar to the JText area if the user scrolls up and down. So the scroll bar, it's a scroll pan. So what's happening here is that the text area is where you put the text. It's a component. You add that, or you wrap that inside a scroll pan. The scroll pan is a pan that allows you to scroll vertically and horizontally. So after you create your text area, you can create a scroll pan and pass the text area as a parameter to the constructor of the scroll pan, and that's what you will get. So here is an example, an extension example for investment frame that uses a text area, and as you can see here, this is the definition of the private members. Some of these values are defined as constants, and the other components that you're going to use, the label, a label for the rate, the text field to enter the button, and then the text area in order to display the different balance. So here is the frame, creating the account, creating the text area, making it not editable, then create the text field, the button, the panel as you did in the past. So the text field, create the label and text field, the button. Now you're using append on the area in order to display a new balance here, and then this is the panel that put them all together. I'm going to stop here in this video, and so we covered the text field and text area, and in the next video I will start from the layout manager.